Hi, everybody. Well, my first career was as a college professor for 22 years, working with North Carolina State University and Brigham Young University. And in that capacity, I worked as a sociologist and uh, clinical social work as well. And as time went by and I got ready for retirement from that, I decided to continue on working professionally, but as a therapist, psychotherapist, counselor. I retrained in social work, got a master's degree, and became a clinical social worker. And worked for the next 20 years after retiring from college work with youth treatment programs in southern Utah. These programs were with children, both boys and girls, adolescents from families, and also who were assigned by state corrections program to work with them. And in the working in these programs, there was one particular model, one particular theoretical model that I used not necessarily exclusively, but predominantly. And that's called transactional analysis. Transactional analysis. And in the video which you're about to see, I am training staff members of a wilderness program in north of St. George in Enterprise, Utah, who are working in a wilderness program with children who spend anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks in this program, where they have to cook their own food, sleep on the ground in sleeping bags, hike during every day, winter, summer, fall, spring, when they're there. So it's different periods of the year. This was intensive program, intensive changes taking place in the kids. And what you're going to see is some of the training that I gave to staff members who are going to be working with these kids out in the field, out in the wilderness, in the mountains, the desert, wherever the kids were at that point in time. So it'll be self-explanatory. I think you'll enjoy it. But more importantly, I think you, the watcher of this program, will benefit from it. I taught it to every class that I taught in college after I learned about it, because most of the college kids were in sociology because they wanted to learn how to get along with other people. And yet very little of that nature was actually taught in typical sociology classes. So this model, TA model, transactional analysis, you'll benefit from, believe me.
He's going to take some time today and do some ego states presentation.
What you're going to hear, you're never going to forget.
Yes.
What else? It is difficult in a large program, such as you can see here, we got half the troops here and the other half are in the field, to get everybody on the same page, and especially when it comes to things that are useful to you that could be useful to everybody. And what you're going to hear this morning hopefully will be useful to you, not only in this program, but in your life ahead, as spouses, as parents, as employees of other businesses that you might go into, as bosses. Wherever you interact with somebody else, this should be useful to you, what you're going to get this morning. Do I have a testimony to that effect by anybody?
Amen. Amen.
Word.
Works for me.
Works for him, you gotta watch out.
I have an ego.
In the psychological field, there is only one theory, one paradigm. Paradigm is 2 nickels, y'all know that.
Is what?
A paradigm. There's only one paradigm, one theory that incorporates both the social and the psychological. In other words, what's going on between people, what's happening out here in terms of phenomena, as contrasted with what's going on inside, what's happening. And this, what you're going to hear today, is the only theory that I've been introduced to in 79 years, like that.
Close.
Close. In a lot of years, with regard to these two aspects of being able to look at what's going on and understand it. Well, for those of you who haven't heard, how many have heard what I'm going to present today, the ego state? Let's see. A good number of you. How many have not? Let's see, hold them high, real high, so I know exactly. So I'll try to address you guys more. And it's a good review for the other ones because the first time you hear it, you say, the second time, from there, the third time, oh, I'm using this. I mean, right? Mike and I have a special relationship because we use this in tandem for how many months, Mike?
15.
Was it that long?
12, 15.
12 months, I think, probably closer. We would go out together. We would work with the youth correction kids, holding a group with them. And we would work as a team in doing this, and it was more fun than anything I've had happen in a long time, because of the mutual understanding that each of us had as to what was going on. So that's kind of a brief introduction. It's social psychological. It combines both areas, interactions plus what's going on with the mind. And also it is phenomenological, which means it's based on behavior. This model primarily is based on what you see happening, not what you think is going, what you see happening. You're able to get clues right out from what's happening as you go on. It makes what was mud for me before in terms of people's interactions all of a sudden clarified. It's like putting a map that's got different cuts in it, where you put it on top like an exam paper or something, and all the right answers stand out. That's the way that this model helps. It helps you see things that you didn't recognize before, and even more importantly, it helps you with you. It helps you then be able to respond appropriately and check yourself out. Am I acting appropriately with something other than, gee whiz, I don't know about you, so it should be very useful to you. Okay, the basis of it is that by the time that we are 3 years old, how many years old?
3.
Guys are listening, good. By the time you're 3 years old, already there are 6 different parts of your personality that are obvious to anyone who is observant and who is familiar with this model. 6 different parts of the personality by the time you're 3 years old. And these 3 parts never leave you. They're with you the rest of your life. So is it important to know what those 6 are? Well, first one is when you, I'd like to have you describe to me an infant. When you see an infant, boy or girl, what is its behavior? What do you see? What is it? What's happening there? Describe it.
It's either sleeping or crying.
So it sleeps and it cries.
And it eats.
What else does it do? It eats. And when it eats, what do you hear? What do you see?
It's happier.
It's what?
Happier.
It's happier.
And it
Oh,
falls asleep again.
yeah. And then it falls asleep. Okay, those are some. And when it doesn't get fed, when it wants to be fed, what happens? It cries. Just cries. It screams! I mean, it gets to the point where it can scream, right? Okay, so you have these different, then this, and what else is this, as this child begins to get a little older, this natural child, we call it, part of self, as it gets older, what does it begin to do? Observant?
Just explore.
Curious.
It's a perfect example.
It's annoying.
Creative, observant, curious, all these are aspects of it. It has emotions, anger you represented already, feeling good, feeling great, all when it has its needs met. And its primary desire in life of the natural child is to what? Be comfortable. To feel what? Feel good. Oh. And anything that doesn't make me feel good, and it's uncomfortable, then what?
Get mad.
Yeah, like to. Stupid.
stinks. The program sucks. You come out here for this. So all of these aspects of the natural child, you never see these in the field, do you? Well, anything else, Mike, that I've left out about the natural child? Okay. There's there's words that describe this, but in essence, when you see these things going on, oh, natural child, you feel comfortable. Joanna's like seeing that big smile on her face. Feel good. Okay. Next one. Comes along when, will you sit up? Put your feet on the floor. Put your feet on. Then I said, put your feet on the floor. Stupid. Staff around here, they don't work. Put up with this stuff day after day. What do you think of these new people here anyway? Have you ever seen such lousy beginners as this? And I feel, you've been here for a long time. He isn't doing very well. What do we got going here, gang? Critical parent.
In the middle.
Oh, here in the middle. Critical parent. And what did you observe as I went through that role playing with you? What did you observe in terms of me? What did you see?
Your voice got louder.
Voice got louder. Doesn't have to, but it got louder for a lot of what I did.
A lot of demo.
I can say pretty much the same thing. You think so I consider that the right answer. I say very quietly, but I'd be just as critical as when I'm. It goes from subtleties to obvious exaggerations in a critical parent. And the subtleties can trigger as well as the loudness. If someone hears a put down, it only can be a very quiet little put down, and it can have the same impact as when it's done in a loud way. Okay? So one of the most difficult things you are going to have to do, I think, because I have that difficulty, is to be able to detect in yourself when you speak and when you are responding whether there's any element of critical parent. Because what happens if there is what? I said for her to put her feet on the floor. What did she do? Did she do it? How long did it take for her to finally do what I told her to do? Quite a while. What ego state were you in?
I don't know.
You weren't complying.
I was adaptive.
You weren't complying. You were not adaptive. Come on. What was it?
Rebellious.
You're rebellious. Yeah. And the thing that triggers the rebellious child is critical parent. If you want to make sure that somebody says, screw you, if you have it. What do you have to do? All you have to do is have a slight edge of critical parent in your heart. Well, I see you got that done. And how much longer do I have to stay out here anyway? It's Wednesday morning, and I'm going to pick you up. Oh man, I've never had it. What? No, you do what you want to do. I don't care. That aspect of self. And the reason I say it's tough because I thought I had it pretty well under control. I pretty well could detect when I had it. My wife would keep coming up, honey, do you know how you sound? I sound fine. Honey, do you know how you sound? I sound okay. I'm doing it right. It's good to have feedback from others on that because sometimes you cannot detect it in yourself. You're so used to it. It's just the way I talk normal. It's just the way I talk normal. I'll sit up. I'll sit up. I'll sit up. I'm not talking normal. Sit up. You don't hear it in yourself. You don't detect it. Notice the posture of the body. This finger. Rolling of the eyes. How long? Don't you understand what I'm saying? How stupid are you? Intake of breath. Rigidity. Jutting of the chin. You know that look, right? That look. Just, yeah. Stop looking at me like that. Right? Yeah. All of those are, and I'm spending a little time on this because this is the toughest one you'll have to deal with in yourself. Most of it. Some of you may not. Most of you will. Because once you're in that, you're guaranteed, it's guaranteed, whether they show it or not, that you're going to increase the rebellious reaction. That can be hidden, so you're not aware that they're really feeling that way. Feeling is a big part of this. But it typically will come out later to perhaps in a, what we call passive-aggressive way, to get you when they've got a good opportunity to get you. Okay? Okay, rebellious child, adaptive child. Well, y'all stand up now just for a minute.
Yeah.
Everybody, give me 3-4 times. Put your other finger on your head as you're doing this. Isn't this what a bunch of adaptive ego states all of you guys are that did that. And yet, congratulations, because if you're not adaptive to some extent in this world, what happens? You get rubbed off, one way or another. You learned a long time ago to be adaptive when you went to your first class. And you sat in the class and you know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do what?
Quiet.
Be quiet.
Sit still.
Sit still.
Pay attention.
Pay attention. At least make it appear as if you are paying. Because what happens if you don't appear like you're paying attention? They call on you. By the way, I'm not in, that's someplace else. Okay, adaptive. The adaptive child, by the time you're 3 years old, you learn to adapt. And you adapt in various ways, and that ego state is obvious when I told you all to stand up. That ego state, really, I don't know why, just they tell you nothing, and you sit down, and wag your hand, you put your hand on your head. It's adaptive to do what you're told to do. Now, Mike has raised an interesting question on this issue of adaptiveness. And remind me on that, Mike, if I don't get to it, having to do with the LP.
Was it the difference between strategizing from the adult and...
Not only that, but even as a small child, when it's going on, what's happening.
Well, you got two kinds of adaptive, right? Is that what you're talking about? I've asked so many questions about it, I'm having a tough time remembering.
Mike, if you don't remember what I'm asking you, then crying out loud, just don't say anything.
I copied it. I'll just stay here a minute.
I'll come back to that.
Okay. So.
When you wake up. Are you there, Mike?
Not yet.
What am I doing?
Critical parent.
Critical parent. I'm being, what would you call it? Sarcastic, right? Sarcastic is critical parent. Making fun of things. Now, if we were not friends, if he did not know and I did not know that he knew, then that we were jousting and jesting in the process, then this could be real reactive. It could set in motion a critical parent real strong. Screw you, right, Mike? He does that anyway.
In fact, I just got to say, like, there were times when we were doing this with the state kids, and Wes would be going on and they'd only be half paying attention. He'd say, would you seriously just put your leg down? And the kid, you could just see him like, and then when he realized that it was just a joke, he's like, I knew all along. That's cool. That's right. Over-relax.
Okay, so we've got rebellious child. That one, most of the kids that we get, that's one of their strong ego states, isn't it? They're not going to do what anybody tells them to do, and they've done it for so long that they've got themselves oftentimes into serious trouble. They're going to do what they want to do. Screw you, I'll do what I want to do. Folks, what are the relationships between children and parents of the young people that come to us in the program? Torn apart. for the most part, because typically the parents get sucked into the critical parent, and they're not able to respond in another way that we'll bring up in a little while. And they get locked in this, you told you, out of coming from the child. And it just goes, it's like a drama that goes on. You can just about predict. I don't have to, when you get a kid that really responds to critical parent, I ask in my mind, who in his environment has really had a strong impact upon his development of this or that child? And it could be the father, it could be the mother, it could be an older brother, it could be a school teacher, it could be a babysitter, it could be someone who lived in a home, it could be nearly anyone that he became sensitized to that critical parent to respond negatively to that critical parent. Okay, nurturing. Oh, how many of you just love these kids? Well, we got a couple of half
I don't know if we can raise our hands or not.
Well, now I give you permission to raise your hand. There you go. Okay, you just love these kids so much that you like to what?
Well, I want to save them. I want to save them.
Huh?
Sometimes I want to save them from pain.
Save them from pain. Do they experience pain out in this place? In this program?
Some class.
Would you two come up here? We need you here, living representatives of the nurturing parent. Is that bad to have a nurturing parent? Remember about that?
If you're balanced.
What do you mean if you're balanced?
You swing back and forth between critical.
You swing back and forth between critical parents.
That confuses them, doesn't it? Whoa! It's off balance. But that's good, you're in balance, but they're off balance.
You keep them on the edge of their seat.
On the edge of their seat. Okay, what's the problem with a nurturing parent in our program? A strong nurturing. I mean a nurturing parent that just loves these kids and wants to make sure that, you know, it doesn't happen. And I'll do your fires for you. I'll get you through this program. You just stick with me, man. We'll make it. Okay? And if you have a problem, if you have a problem, just come and talk with me. I mean, and if you have trouble, especially with that other staff member, you come and talk with me. And we'll, you know, I'll help you out. Because I've got some, I know somebody back at base to take care of him. All those reports they talked about, you know, I could write on them. Okay? Everybody? Everybody? Based on what? We're buddies based on what?
This manipulation. Not manipulation.
Well, that's a good question. The manipulation part of it. Why am I so intent on his being successful?
Because it's making me good.
Make me look good? If it's making me look good, for whose benefit am I doing this? For my benefit. If it's to really help him, and I think this is really going to help him, and it's, I'm going to use a big word here, appropriate, then nurturing. Yeah, that's the balance part of what you were talking about. To be able to be appropriate with nurturing. But so many new people, especially in this, come in this business, get sucked in because they're here because they care about people. Most are. They're not just necessarily selfish and here because they're going in a butt. They really want to help these kids because I've been there before, I know what it's like, I grew up like that, whatever. But how do you help if you're in the nurturing parent can become a real issue? And it's one where early on, reports of staff to you, are you being appropriate in your nurturing? Or is it going beyond what would be appropriate? How do you know if it's appropriate? Well, we'll get to that too. Little professor. This one is not as detectable, as observable, as the other ego states, which are much more blatant, much more obvious in terms of seeing. The little professor is kind of like the little genius back there in the background. Yeah.
I'm wondering if that last example you gave of doing it for your own benefit, manipulating him to make yourself look good, would that be an example also not only of a nurturing parent but of a little professor?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm using the environment, and the reason I asked to do this, the only reason I asked or I accepted doing this when I was asked was so I could have fun and show off here. That's the only reason I did it. So you are all benefiting me. Thank you very much. Especially when you laugh loud. That would be absolutely what? Manipulating you for my benefit. Yeah.
I also noticed that a nurturing parent is pretty susceptible to the little professor.
The nurturing parent is pretty,
can be pretty susceptible to a
can be
little
manipulated
manipulator.
by the little professor, absolutely. In fact, the little professor can use any of these. He can use, there's a real link here between the little professor, these two, right? See them? Little professor and the natural child. Because the natural child wants to feel good. Who helps it feel good? Who is the one that's using whatever information, knowledge, data, history, things that are pertain to this particular situation to help my natural child to be able to feel good?
Manipulator.
Manipulator. So it is constantly engaged in a process of helping the natural child feel good. And then typically consider for the natural child, we use food as an illustration of what helps it feel good. And you will spend hours and hours around that fire talking about food. The natural child is just going wild. Only if I had this and put a little of this on it, and it was this big enough, and I had to add this to it too. And they get all wound up, don't they? Euphoria, vicarious euphoria through imagining, just talking about food and the natural child. What else brings that on for a 16-year-old? Huh? Music? Yep. Certain kinds of music, like Bach and Beethoven. Movies. Get into that, right? Especially if they're what? Huh?
Violent.
Violent. More violent than violent. What else? What else turns on a 16-year-old?
Maybe boys or girls.
Nookie, man, it's like the nookie.
Right on. Obvious?
I feel
What's the
good.
drive there? Boy, it's pretty powerful, isn't it? So, sex, what else? Drugs. Do they make you feel good? Well, those of you for whom it's made you felt really good doing them, raise your hand. Little professor. Drugs and sex.
And rock and roll.
And rock and roll. And having a good time. What are you doing? Hanging out. Hanging out. What do you do when you're hanging out? Having a good time. Well, what are you doing when you're hanging out? Just having a good time. Okay? And pot helps that. Other drugs help that. Feel good. So who helps the natural child get its drugs, get its sex? Who helps? So the professor figures out who can I manipulate here? Who would be one of my potential satisfiers of my needs and my desires? Who could that be? Let's see. Okay? And so a little professor is operating in that regard. It's providing the brain power that will help the natural child feel good. We got them all? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ego states are there by the time you're 3 years old. I should have asked you that question. And stay with you how long? The rest of your life. You can see these. I detect them in myself. I detect them in my wife, my adult kids. We all have them. So what's lacking? So this is my personality up till the time I'm 3. Up until the time I'm 8. That's what my personality is. It consists of flow back and forth between these ego states. Not much else. We call that being a child, don't we? Kind of in broad terms. What's lacking? You guys got the answers to this. Okay. Right on. It's the adult. Part of self. That typically doesn't begin to develop, according to the people who developed this theory, which was Eric Berne, psychiatrist, Austrian, moved to San Francisco, worked with colleagues, educators, social workers, in a forum seminar they had weekly, and out of that came this model called Transactional Analysis. That's the name of it, TA, Transactional Analysis, including the ego states. And so they said, as they begin out of their work, they said, well, what's lacking is somebody who's responsible for all of this. So somebody who's knowledgeable about rules, somebody who's equipped to understand values. When does that take place? And they began to perceive it. It started about 8 years of age. Interestingly enough. Some of you may, or that might be a significant age. And yet, not necessarily. We have kids that come in this program. I'm going to make a bold statement. Who've never experienced an adult age. Who've only operated and continue to operate out of these 6 egos in their lives. And when you ask them, well, what was the incident that took place just before you were sent here or came here or your parents sent you here? What was the incident that took place? Well, there I was driving my car, and drinking, and Ken, I said, well, I would ask, during any of that, just as you started out on that trip, before you took the first drink, started to drive, was there any part of, in your mind, any conversation going on about maybe this wouldn't be too late? No. No. Anything? No. Before you stole that money, or before you sold those drugs, was there any time when you thought, gee, I really shouldn't be doing this? No. And over, especially in youth correction kids. Just no adult thinking. No adult ego state. Because unless we're going to get into the relative strengths of these in a minute. But unless this one is operative, and becomes operative at some point in their lives are doomed to what?
Those 6 ego states.
Problems. Serious problems in society. Because serious problems in their marriages. Imagine being married to these 6 ego states, and that's all there is in the guy you marry, girl you marry. There's no adults, but boy, is she fun. And the fun goes on and on. Something seems to happen there with the fun. So, divorce time. And then you move on to the next one. Oh, divorce time. So something about the adult, we can go on quite a bit about, tell me what else you think would be factors operating in the adult. What else? What are the characteristics do you think it would have? Yeah.
Accountability.
Accountability. Responsibility. What else?
Appropriate reaction.
Appropriate reaction.
Action,
What's that?
not reaction.
Not reacting at times, right? Choosing not to react. Okay, having some control within to be able to stop it from automatically going to these 6 guys who've been there since the time you were 3 and have been operating the personality and are strong in the personality. Okay, what else would be there for the adult?
Integrity.
Where'd that come from? Integrity. Why integrity? Why is that such a biggie? Doesn't seem to be a big thing out there in society, generally. What is it about integrity?
Just doing what you said you're gonna do.
And
Sticking through it.
somebody being able to trust you, have confidence in you that you will do what you say you're going to do. And you won't do the things that would be jeopardize your relationship if it's in a social relationship. Yeah, that's why it's such a biggie for the adult, and why integrity, which is so glossed over, but character development is the term used in schools. Character development. It never takes place with just these 6 ego states. There's no character development. You're flowing back and forth between the opportunities here and there, just moving on with your life, you know what's just flowing, and there's no serious rudder. There's nothing in control. It's just a boat that's being floated about. Yeah.
I think one of the things that has been a question that I've revisited over the past couple of years with this is that I think everybody here could probably find times when it's appropriate to be adaptive or appropriate to be critical or nurturing or rebellious. And these ego states, all of them except for the adult, denote some sort of negativity. So we're only trying to describe the unhealthy use of these things. So if you find yourself in the adaptive child ego state, then that would be unhealthy. But if you find yourself as an adult assessing objectively a situation and seeing that it is most reasonable for you to adapt to the situation, then that isn't unhealthy. And so I just think that's an important clarification for me to keep moving on.
How many here would like to marry a person who has no natural child? What would life be like?
Boring.
Boring. Dr. Spock and Mrs. Dr. Spock. Yeah. That natural child can be mischievous, exciting, has emotions, it's generated, curious, joking, it's involved in fun. Yeah, man. But how easily can that slip out of gear? How easily can that become inappropriate? Unless there is something there that's guiding. Okay, so we're going to come to strengths. So before that, my family of ego states consists of all of these. Now, one thing in Mike knows how much I love stringing this. Let's just imagine all of you are entering students into Red Cliff. And I ask you here collectively, what do all of you have in common with regard to these ego states? What do you all have in common? I guess it's...
What would we say if we were the students?
Yeah. No, you wouldn't necessarily say this. But what is it that you have in common?
Well, in order to be a student, there has to be something.
To qualify to be a student in this program, you have to what? You what? You have to be missing the adult? Yeah. You have to have a retarded adult. And I tell them that.
In the true
Have you heard me? Have you heard me? And they first they go. If their adults were strong and in control, they would not be in our program. The one thing that typifies everyone who comes in our program, they're all out of control as far as their adults are concerned. They don't have a strong enough adult to govern their personality in a responsible way. So, they're in programs, they're in psych hospitals, they're in rehabilitation programs. They can't get over addictions, et cetera, because their adults are not strong. I know I'm getting a little touchy on maybe, but essential. So, strength and relative strength becomes a big issue. How strong is my adult compared to how strong is my little professor, how strong is my rebellious child? Unless my critical parent, and unless my adult is stronger than either of those, what's going to happen in my life? We're going to see. We're going back to the case history of Wesley W. Craig Jr. when he was 18 years old. Those are my ego states, following the same order here, I believe, that I have there. Natural child, adaptive child, rebellious child, little professor, critical parent, nurturing parent, as well. Maybe not quite the same. And here's, in retrospectively, I went back and now, what was I like when I was 18 years old in terms of my ego states? Okay, natural child, how's that? High strength, right? In my personality. Adaptive child, low. Rebellious child, little professor, enough to qualify me as a psychotherapist. Critical parent,
Very high.
well, you should have, if you think mine is high, you should have known my mother.
Was that critical, man?
That's just fact.
Oh, that was the adult then, okay.
Nurturing parent, how would you like to have me to put your shoulder on and how bad things are going in your life? What do you think?
Poor lamb.
Huh?
Poor lamb.
Would I have been listening? Would I have been helpful? Would I have been nurturing? Look at that. Look at that wind. That's how far down I was. What kind of a father am I going to be if that's the amount of nurturing I have, strength of nurturing in my personality? Where am I going to govern from in my family? What do you think?
Critical parent.
Critical parent. Not me. I'm not going to react the way that my mother reacted to me when she whacked when I didn't do something right. I'm not going to, I hate that stuff. I'm not going to use that when I become a parent. How many have heard that one? How many have experienced that? Hurts, doesn't it? Oh. That you're doing what you hated when you were a child. Why are you doing it? Where did you learn to have such a critical parent, strong critical parent, other than by living in an environment where it was modeled, other than having experienced it? And at an early age, by the time you're 3, it's incorporated. It's part of you. And so when the opportunity comes, when does the opportunity come? When you're dating somebody? Not typically, you're pretty much disguised things through that phase, aren't you? You know, nothing ever really going to turn you off all that much after all. But then you have 1 child, 2 children, 3 children. And you got to, no. And you lose your cool. You lose what? You shift ego states. And you become what? Critical parent. And you're doing what you said you would never do. What was that? You have some good ones. I don't want to
Mine's the bipolar.
bipolar. I'm not going to enter into
Maybe.
it. But, you know, there's possible. I'm going to real exaggerated level. Okay, so when West becomes 18 years old, he goes slower and becomes, as it goes on in time, what's got to change in West? What's going to change?
The adult has to strengthen and some of the other ones have to come down.
I don't know that the other ones ever come down,
Oh.
but you're right on. The adult has to strengthen, or else what? What would you anticipate in my life with my family if I were to hang in there and critical parent would continue to be the strongest ego state of my personality?
Family relationships.
Yeah, they hate you.
Yeah, kids, wife, and finally probably what? Divorce. As easy out as divorce is these days, not it. Yeah. So somehow Wes has to increase the strength of his adults so that when he gets into these internal wrestling matches that go on, Mike and I used to use this with the kids. Mike,
This is so embarrassing for me.
that you have an inner struggle that goes on, a wrestling match, if you will, with regard to one ego state versus the other, as to who's going to be victorious, have its way or not.
Stronger than he looks, man.
That represents that internal struggle that goes on in our mind. And who wins? Who wins?
We're stronger.
Who's ever stronger?
Push up, boy.
Who's ever stronger wins. Now, if we're in the business of helping our young people who come in increase their adult capability, then what do we do to help them do that? What's
Model
our
adult behavior.
model adult behavior? 1. In other words, we don't lose our cool as we typically would have, or we're learning not to do, or we're increasing our adult Yes.
don't react to their other ego states the way that they're used to people reacting.
And they're going to try to trigger you to reacting that way. Because once they got you in the game of pulling you down to a critical parent in terms of their behavior, they've won.
Yeah, it's easy to look at critical parent and say, yeah, you invite the rebellious child from the student, but if you're functioning from your adult ego state and the student is rebellious, what do you feel like doing? Or coming down on them. Just like, oh, don't treat me like that, and then they're sucking that critical parent from those who lean toward that end. Anyways.
So, what do we do then? We model appropriate adult behavior. In spite of when we are being right. What was it? It wasn't here. It was your replacement out there. Can you imagine this? You old people, you staff people, you're old, you're out of it. You've got PMS. That was the one used on who you're going to replace out there. Why you know who. How do you feel when you're out of it, you're old, you got PMS. Critical, I mean coming on to you critically. And after a while, you gotta do what? Step off the side, stop yourself, mutter back and forth between your ego states. What can I say? Is talking to yourself an indication of insanity?
I hope not.
Let me encourage you all to become insane. Because I know of no better way of discovering yourself than to talk to yourself in terms of these issues. Always. Because you tune in on what's really going on. You become aware. You're aware of the inner struggle. Is that what's going on? It's, oh man, yeah, that actual child really pushing her. Oh man, I thought I'd step away from this situation. It helps the adult become aware of what he needs to do. That inner conversation. So I don't, I'm using this, I'd say go right ahead and encourage your students to. In fact, maybe we could, I haven't rehearsed this, except for the last year. Let's try something here. I think the best way that I'm going to be the rebellious child. And we're the same person, only he represents another part of myself, just like we did when we wrestled here. This place is not going to do anything for me. I can see it right now. This place is stupid. It is not going to, it's not what I thought it was going to be. I'm going to get out of here.
You're absolutely right, and the best way to get out of here would be to do everything your staff tells you to do, and be whatever you think your therapist wants you to be. Because if they think they're seeing you progress, then you won't have to invest, but you'll get through in the least amount of time. That's what I would recommend.
But I'd still have to stay. I don't want to stay here. I mean, I don't want to have to go through all this shit. I want to get out of here.
Let's run. Let's get out of here. In fact, I know that the staff are going to go have a meeting here in a minute, and I'm going to ask to go take a cat and slip that cord into my pocket. Let's do that.
Okay, but you got to give me some sign you're getting ready to go, so I know exactly what that is.
When my heart starts beating really fast, it's time to go.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. Let's get out. Let's do it. Am I ready? Because I had the alliance of Whitego State.
Professor.
Professor, beautiful. Now let's shift gears. Same thing, preamble, same thing, except you don't go to critical parent. I mean, you don't go to little professor. Oh man, I can't stand it. I'll never go crazy. I'll jump off a cliff or something. Stick myself, jump on this tree, step, you know, go right to my heart. That's what I'm going to do.
I'm not cleaning my effing pot. I gotta get out of here.
Now, try the adult. She got it. Stand it. I've got ADD, I've got ADHD, I've got BBDDA.
But despite the fact that you have all these things, there's clearly a problem. Because you
You
weren't
know I
happy.
got a problem.
Yeah, but the problem is something that you're going to be dealing with the rest of your life.
Oh, God.
Listen to what I'm saying. You can put this off further if you want, but you don't want to go to DA when you're done with this. What you want to do is really get this under control, because even though you don't like to hear it, your parents are right that you've got some real issues controlling your anger, and you smoke way too much weed.
Well, not too much.
You're right, as a matter of fact.
Where did he go? The inner dialogue that's going on in the head. And if you can get the adults who's participating in that dialogue, it's not just the little professor and the natural child, it's not just the adult, you can get the adult into it. And one way of doing this is the critical incident. I'm going to give you a handout, all of you, if you don't have one already. And the fourth page has to do with, maybe the third page, has to do with critical incidents and dealing with them. Let's take a look at that right now. Before I pass them out, let me go over this with Mike. And pass them out. It's that review, last page, critical crisis event analysis, or critical incident. Something happens, they blow up, they do try to hurt themselves, or they take off down the road, or they give you the finger, or whatever it may be at the time.
Or you had an excellent hike. It could be a positive critical incident as well.
Okay, we'll incorporate that too. Then you sit down at a later time, not while the person is highly emotionally involved in the present ego state.
In fact, Doc Dan likes to say, strike when the iron is not hot. Hotness being the emotion level. So if you let it pass to the point where your judgment isn't clouded by the emotion, that's what he's saying.
Right. So you let the time pass, and then you come back when he or she is calm, and you say, hey, let's take a look. They have learned these. Hopefully they have learned these ego states. If not, from their therapist, from you. Okay? You have, in fact, tell them your experience in one student, and as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, raise your hand if you've seen Brat Camp. Okay, a few of you. There's a kid in there named James Bonfay. He's the kind of pretty boy, real mouthy kid. And the day that they came in, all those kids were in this room just freaking out, and he was particularly mouthy and aggressive. And I felt like there was very little control. We never had that many students at one time. They stayed overnight. I mean, we were just dealing with something that we don't normally deal with. And my tendency is to go to critical parents. So I was getting ready to shut him down with some sarcasm to embarrass him, which was my regular tactic with kids who I felt like I needed to control. And I remembered that Wes had taught that you can't solve any problems unless you're in the adult ego state. So I backed off, and I really did have a battle because I knew I could just embarrass the crap out of him like that and get him to shut up for a while. But I didn't. I thought to myself, you know what? If I just kick back here and let him run his course and try to approach him when the iron is not hot, it will be at least more effective than doing nothing, which is what I'm going to do right now until he's ready to fly. So I sat back, and I felt this sort of euphoric sense of control. I mean, I really felt empowered, and that was when I really started getting. I was very turned on by the practical application of these ideas, because I thought, I'm not getting roped in here, and I just felt like such a stud sitting there, not getting hammered down.
And it worked out okay?
It did, in fact. It did.
That wasn't the incident, Mike, that I was...
That's quite embarrassing.
But that's not bad.
You want, man?
It was the one who heard this one time.
Oh, yeah. His PA P? No, P's.
But that's a good one, keep that one in
Yeah.
mind. In fact, that's probably more basic in terms of its significance than the one you're on now.
Yeah, I went out to work a shift in the field in November, and the very first group we did was mid-hike with these ego states, and we spent maybe 15 minutes on it. And then about 6 weeks later, I got a call from P on the radio who said that there was a student named Sam in that group. It was I can't remember what group, but anyway, there was a student named Sam who heard that ego states that one time. It's the only time he heard it. And when it was his job for his phases to do a group, he did the ego states, and then he processed events. He used this crisis event analysis that he came up with this on his own, because I didn't teach him this, to process the group dynamics with something that had happened. And their group went on for 2 hours, and P was so excited about how effective it was that she called in to tell me that that had happened. But I was just shocked that he had such a working knowledge of this after a 15-minute group. So it's not, and I learned from that, for some it will be very helpful to have a nice descriptive paragraph on each one of these, but what was more important for him was the feelings that were associated. He could feel when he was the rebellious child, or he could feel when he was moving into critical parent, and that's why it stuck with him so much, I think.
So, some therapists have never used this model. They asked me to present it to the therapist a couple of weeks ago, which I did. They may or not choose to use this as a basic model, but they're familiar with it now. But for the staff, my sense is it has such high utility for you, whether it's the therapist who helps them understand these things, or whether you help them understand these things. You be in a position to be able to share with them these ego states, and then to use it in processing. Because each time you sit down and process, the adult has to become involved. Each time you process. I guess it doesn't have to, but the opportunity for it to become more insightful, more aware. Yeah, I did do that. In fact, as you have the individual, well, what was the situation? I'll sit down with you. Well, I understand you hit a therapist this week. Hasn't happened for years. I can remember.
I don't think so.
Tell me what happened. Okay. And which of your ego states were involved in that? Which of your ego states were? Oh, then you must have had this ego state and that ego. No. Which of your ego states were involved? Back to the student, to process himself. What just went on with his life? What was it that took place? Well, I got ticked off at the staff because he asked me to clean my cup again. I just cleaned it 4 days ago. and I just, well, I must have been my natural channel. Yeah. And then what happened? Well, then that was just before I doubled up my fist. Natural channel. And then I thought, no, better than doing this would be to get him when he's sleeping. That's the old professor. And was any adult there? Was the adult saying, yeah, I'll be just briefly, it said, you shouldn't do this. And then I didn't listen. So what would you see then, in order not to repeat this needs students, what would need to take place? Because apparently these are the consequences of taking this life. Well, it would be better for me to be more in control at that moment when my adult gets stronger. And all the time you're helping him help his or her adult get stronger by just doing this, by perceiving, by having the insight, the awareness that these things are happening in me, the student. Yeah, this is the way I'm dealing with the world. Out of my rebellion, man, what's going to happen when you talk? What happens if you continue? I'll probably end up dead or exiled. True. Anyway, that's the process. That you be very quiet, just to, what do you see happening within yourself? What do you see taking place there? It's processing it. Which of your ego states emerged as executive? And that one would be the rebellious child. Describe how you feel about the results of this incident. I had one kid practice. It's Renly. I'm disappointed in myself. Not bad. I'm disappointed in myself that I acted that way. that was that issue when he got up on the mountain there, hill, mountain to him, in the snow, he was from Australia, and slipping and sliding, and the staff were slipping and sliding too, and I wasn't going to let him kill me. I'm not going to climb this mountain. So what did you do?
You turned around.
Turned around. Didn't become a what?
It didn't become a big incident like you just.
It didn't become a control issue.
Yeah.
Was it, were you losing anything by turning around?
Mhm.
And he cooled off, and next day he says, I'm disappointed in my behavior.
Wes, I think this is something you haven't been privy to all the time, but as Dr. Dan has come in and talked to us about not power struggling, about deviancy, about not needing the student to be a certain way for you to be okay, all of those things can be interpreted in terms of ego states, and the more you go through those exercises in your mind, the more functional these ideas will be to you. But with that specific incident that he just discussed, one of the trickiest things for us is this adaptive child, because for all intents and purposes, a really good adaptive child is going to be able to get through their program and grad only having been minimally affected. And I'm sure Bright Dragon smells that a lot at graduation camp when a kid comes through. And so one way to ensure that we're seeing the real kid and not the adaptive child is to provide them more space to be just who they want to be. The more controlling pressure you put on a kid to be a certain way, the more obvious it is to them just exactly who they need to be to meet the status quo. But the more space that you give them, the more likely you will be to see who they really are. So it's not as important that the kid hikes up the hill as it is important that the kid is willing not to hike up the hill. And that's the real him that you're seeing. You're not seeing adaptive, you're seeing the natural child. And now, because you know where that kid really is, then you can pass that on to the therapist, and the therapist can start assessing therapy based on reality, not on a facade. Does that make sense?
Are we going to see every kid on solo this week? Given this space.
Wes, if I can just follow that just a little bit, one of the other things I believe to be associated with that is this nurturing parent. If staff decide if you find that you're in the nurturing parent and you decide to ignore the adult, and you found yourself a nice little puppy, and you fail to recognize that they already have a nurturing parent at home, once that student graduates, please just prepare to terminate your contract with Red Cliff, start the adoption process, and stay with that student for the rest of it. They're going to need you. If we decide to encourage that nurturing parent or the rescuing techniques that their parents have been using, I see it at graduation. As soon as they see that parent again, they expect the same thing to happen all over again, however good the program has been for them. So, an easy one to fall into.
I know that if I were in your shoes, I would pray that there be no critical incidents out there while I was on my shift this week. I want to help you shift gears on that one. Pray for critical incidents.
Well, it sounds weird, but I'd rather deal with something that's pretty obvious than solidify.
Because each critical incident is an opportunity for the review. For the review to be significant in their life. They've never had to process all that before, most of them. You have an opportunity without the critical incidents, you don't have that. They can be minor, they can be major.
So you're passing these out to us, right? And you're suggesting that we use this, that we introduce the children, the students to this, sorry, and in these exact words, that we introduce this process to them?
Well, we're not so concerned with exact words.
Well, right, but...
But they come to understand, so they can come to understand what's in themselves, and then be able to identify it in themselves. They'll identify it in you before they identify it in themselves. Huh, you're a critical parent, that's the way you're coming on. You're a critical parent, that's what you are. That's right, yeah. In fact, one of the suggestions down here, bottom of page 2, what would you do? Once ego states are understood, it becomes tempting to call other people on their ego states. I gotta share this. I gotta share this. Andrea, was attending this last week. And afterwards she said, you know, I was sitting there and I thought to myself, gee, this would really be appropriate for my husband. And then she said, and all of a sudden I realized, well, it'd be appropriate for me. And I think that's, you know, and if you call people on their ego state, they typically will go where?
Well, it's critical.
It'll hit
It's
rebellious
critical
child,
parent.
critical
And
parent.
they become defensive. Okay, well, and I would encourage you to take that egogram, even though it's just an exercise. It'll help you get it better. Think it back when you were 16, 17, 18 years old. From today, that's fine too. For yourself, to do a self-analysis. That's why I have the students do this, so that they can take a look at themselves. Where am I with regard? And typically, they will overestimate their what? Adult. Underestimate their little potential. Those are the two the most dubious on this question about. But at any rate, have them do that. Just an exercise. For you, try it, see how it goes. What you discover, you can do it in 30 seconds. Not a big deal. And then take a sense, okay, now what do I have to change then? When do I have? What incidents in my life require some change? What do I need to change about myself? If the adult is integrity, if the adult incorporates honesty and truth, if the adult follows rules because it has decided it is best for me to do that because it will be best for others, then what rules are you violating? What behaviors are you engaging in that would be detrimental and probably poor role modeling too, as far as these people are concerned? If we have staff that are integrated, have integrity, and who model from the adults, holy mackerel, we've got dynamite in this program, given the opportunity we have to do it in the best of all environments, where they're totally out of everything else. And the willingness provides that. That's why here's, man, and this is happening. It's happening more and more in this program. I was with the program 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and there were a lot more critical parent staff. There were a lot more, hey, we're going to make that mom, we're going to make that mom, we're going to do this. Ex-Marines are singing theology. And today, much more sensitive. That's what I said. Going into your groups, just more sensitivity to these things. And I think part of that's coming from the training you're receiving from Doc Dan and Mike on this side of it. So keep it up, and I'm through. Yeah.
Just a question. Having heard this last week and then being in the field this week, I was able to process. I was just wondering what Doc Dan talks about us filling roles for the students, like the parent and the friend role. I see a lot, well, particular staff are notorious for being good staff.
Okay, so confuse the terms as they're being used here with terms as they're used commonly. If I am relating as a parent, an older, wiser guy, what ego state am I in when I'm doing that? What ego state am I in when I'm doing that?
Adult.
Adult. And that's the critical difference.
Right.
I'm not being a parent in the sense this is the way you're going to run your life. I'm being in my adult trying to help you to be responsible the best that I can with whatever you're able to do.
I was just, in Doc Dan's language, that's where those fit. You got parents that are nurturing and parents that are critical.
Right.
Where you're controlling, and then your friend would be your nurturing parent, basically. That's what he means when he says, don't be their friend.
Right. Well, I see that a little bit, but nurturing parent is, you know, it's almost like also the natural child. I think, you know, when staff want to be the student's friend, it's like they want to feel good. They don't want to feel guilty about, you know, coming down hard on the students. They want to be buddy-buddy and rub elbows, you know, the whole time while they're out there. And it's not really, I was just wondering how that, am I correct in saying that it also fits into natural child when they're acting as a friend?
But your adult determines when it's appropriate, when it's beneficial. Your adult determines it. And that's why it's so critical. We come at this from the adult ego state, whatever we're dealing with. Now I've had fun in here lately. I had fun last week. I have fun most of the time when I present this. My natural child has a ball doing this. And yet if my natural child got out of control, and it's capable of doing that, what would be the result?
Chaos.
Chaos. Right on. Hey, let's screw this. Let's go out and have fun, man. Let's go. Who would like to go out? I can, you can hook natural child that quick. If you're really in that, you can hook another natural. Pull it that quick, and we're out the door, and we're going. Sit down. Okay, I'm through.
Thank you, Wes.
Hi. Hi. If after seeing this movie you want more information, just contact me at wwescr@gmail.com. wwescr@gmail.com.